This is Chapter 10, Congress, discussion number 4. What are members of Congress supposed to do? So, what's the definition of a good member of Congress? What are they supposed to do while they're there? What affects the way that they vote on the different bills? Well, different members of Congress have a different perspective on what they ought to do once they are elected to Congress. Some members of Congress view themselves as a delegate. They are simply supposed to do whatever the people back home want them to do. They are to essentially put their finger up in the wind and see which way their home district really wants them to do it. The people who voted them in, their constituents, and try to reflect what their constituents want as accurately as possible. There are some members of Congress who say that they had been elected to Congress because the people trust them to make the correct decisions. It may not necessarily be the best decision, but they have been entrusted in order to make good decisions, and so they believe that they don't necessarily have to keep track of what everyone wants them to do back home. They've been entrusted to make those proper decisions. Some people vote as partisans, simply that they belong to the political party and they are going to follow the political party and what the political party prefers. Some of them are politicos. This says balance the ideas on what they think is best. Essentially, they're kind of playing the political game, figuring out which way to get votes, which way to kind of con people. Maybe con's a little bit strong word, but convince people that their way is the right way, maybe by trading votes, but really working the political process. Um, some people might vote for people based on some of these options. Some people might vote someone saying they really ought to do what I want. That would be a delegate. Some people would say, that person seems pretty smart. I'm sure they're going to make good decisions. That would mean that they're voting for that person as a form of a trustee. Some people vote solely for whether they have an R after their name or whether they have a D after their name, and saying, well, the Republican National Party is right or the Democrat National Party is right. And so, therefore, whatever they want, I hope my guy votes that way. And a Politico is, not really a lot of people vote Politico-wise. I know one time I voted for a guy, couldn't stand either candidate, but this guy had a particular letter after his name, and I said, that's the only reason why I'm voting for the guy, and then he turned around and changed political parties halfway through his term. So that kind of didn't really work out for me. So what do members of Congress do? I mean, yes, they vote uh, based on those ideas, but there are other things that they do. They serve the constituents. They, for example, if a member of their state is having a difficult time dealing with the Social Security Administration or having a problem dealing with the EPA, they contact a member of Congress. They're there in Washington. They have something to know to do with the rules. They have a little bit of clout. It sounds a lot better when someone knocks on the door of the EPA and say, hello, I'm a member of Congress. I have a problem you need to listen to, rather than if I were to walk up to the door of the EPA, knock on the door, and say, I have a problem. And so, in this way, they serve constituents in helping them deal with the government bureaucracy. They serve as committee members, right? They don't just go to the big room and yell and scream and do speeches. They actually participate in the legislative writing process as committee members or investigate in different problems or ideas of the United States. They also oversee the federal agencies. Once they pass laws, it's then their responsibility to make sure that members of the executive branch are doing what the law was supposed to do. And so, whether they're spending the money correctly or whether they're following the laws as they were intended, or whether they're making things up as they go, that is Congress has to know. And therefore, the oversight, the investigative process that members try to make sure that everything's doing what they're supposed to. Now, being a member of Congress is a paid position, but there's more than just being paid. Um, your parents, if they own a house, they get to have a tax deduction for the interest that they're paying on their mortgage. Now, members of Congress are required to live in their home state. And of course, they're going to have some place to live in Washington in order to conduct the business of government. So they actually get a tax deduction to maintain two houses in their tax returns. They get traveling money to travel back and forth to their home state. They also have a pension plan. It's a pretty good one, I might add. They are given office space. There's a couple different office buildings right next to the Capitol building that are entirely belong to Congress. And as you are becoming a member of Congress, you get an office all carved out for you. You also get an allowance to maintain an office back in your home state so that members of your constituency can come to that office and say, hey, I've got a problem. I need to talk to the senator, or I need to talk to the representative. And they'll probably say, representative's too busy, but I'm a member of his office and I will pass on that message for you and see what we can do for you. They also have free franking. A nice little fancy term to essentially say that they are allowed to send mail home to their constituents, and that is free in order to communicate what's going on in Congress. A lot of times you will get flyers in the mail from your member of the House of Representatives saying that these are different programs that you can avail yourself to courtesy of the federal government. That's what the free franking is for. They also get help, and they can print out their speeches, and that they get that service for free. Printing out those newsletters that they then send out is also free. Free parking. Now, most of you are just now starting to drive. Do not recommend that you start learning to drive in Washington, D.C., but ask your parents, and they will probably tell you that finding parking in Washington, D.C. is a nightmare that they probably never want to repeat. However, if you are a member of Congress, free parking, one of the really good perks. Also, Congress does have health club memberships that you get for free. Also, this is actually in the Constitution, no member of Congress can be inhibited by the police or military force. Now, that's a really fancy way of saying that they can't get a parking ticket, they can't get a speeding ticket, they can go through red lights anytime they feel like it, because imagine if you were a policeman who didn't like a member of Congress for whatever reason. You could use your police power to pull them over every morning and say you were going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit, or you did not come to a complete stop while you were at that stop sign, and just harass them to no end, and that would be an abuse of your power. And this is something that the kings were doing in Great Britain, so they made sure it was written in the Constitution that the executive power of the government could not be used to intimidate or to harass members of the legislature. So now, if you are a member of Congress, is it smart for you to run stop signs, stop lights, speed? No, because you could kill someone, and that's a lot of bad publicity. But that's one reason why members of Congress can pretty much do whatever they want to when it comes to driving down the road and that type of thing. Now, that does not mean that they cannot be arrested for felonies. Misdemeanors are, they kind of depend on which one it is, but for the most part, traffic violations are not a worry for a member of Congress. Of course, one other thing you need to realize on that one, it has to be the official member of Congress's vehicle. They just can't pick up anybody else's car and do whatever they want. They have to be properly identified, and if you keep your eyes open, especially when you're in the Washington, D.C. area, you will see license plates that identify that person as a member of Congress, and that's what the big signal for a policeman to say, have a nice day, sir. This concludes discussion number 4, what are members of Congress supposed to do? It also concludes the chapter 10 of government entitled Congress.